I just built the ultimate game development and content creation PC, and everything in it is exactly what I wanted. In fact, I've been planning out this PC build for nearly 5 months now, and I've actually been buying parts for it way back since August. Just been kind of buying things as I could find good deals on them. Needless to say, I'm extremely excited that this PC build has finally come together and I can use it for what it was meant to be used for. Anyways, in today's video, I would just like to go over all the components that I put into this excessive ultimate game development PC and talk about why I chose them specifically. Also, as I go along and talk about them, I'm going to be including some footage of me putting this together and going through the whole build process. So anyways, let me know in the comment section below about what you think about all the components that I chose, and let me know which you would have chose differently and what PC parts that you're trying to get your hands on. And speaking of that, if you are having any difficulty of finding, any components, I know CPUs and GPUs, especially the newer ones, are extremely difficult to get nowadays. Be sure to check out the previous video that I made where I actually talk about how I got my hands on some of the more difficult to get components, such as the AMD Ryzen 5950X processor and the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070 Founders Edition graphics card. Now, before we go any further, I'd just like to say that while I am building the ultimate game development PC for me, this does not mean that you need to go out and spend all this money and do the same. Now, just because you have a PC that's not that powerful doesn't mean you can't make amazing games. At that point, maybe you can't have the best graphical fidelity, or maybe things will take a little bit longer if you try to really push it hard. But at this point, you should kind of be focusing more on the mechanics of making a game and figuring out kind of, what are some of the design aspects and how you can design a good game even on some lower end hardware. That is honestly going to be the most important for you. In fact, my past 2 computers have been laptops. Sure, they were, higher end laptops, but still they were like nowhere near as powerful as something like this. And I've been able to, learn game development and make a whole bunch of games using them. And then as you develop more and more and you get into a place where you can actually start to make money off of the games that you're making, then maybe, it makes sense to invest in something a little bit more expensive so you can start experimenting with more stuff on the high end. So anyways, before I start going through component by component, I think it's important to talk about kind of the overall goals of this PC. What are my sort of objectives and things that I want this PC to do for me? When you're putting together a new PC build, that's always the place that you want to start is, ultimately, what do you want to get out of this PC? So for me, performance is the number one. Obviously, content creation is what I do. I'm going to be making a lot of games and tutorial videos using this PC, so of course, if you're interested in that kind of thing, make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on any of those. And specifically in game development, I am pretty interested in doing multi-threaded work, so if I can have some type of high core count and be able to utilize a whole bunch of threads at one time. And my current setup is sometimes struggling when it comes to doing certain things within game development, and when you have to wait a whole bunch of time for just kind of little things here and there, that really adds up and it leads to you being a less productive person. So if I can minimize that time that I'm waiting as much as possible, then that is going to be extremely valuable to me. The other thing, of course, because I have this YouTube channel, I do a lot of video editing and rendering, and especially with my tutorial videos, I record them and edit them and publish them all in 4K. And my current PC is definitely reaching the limits of what it can do with the video editing that I want to do. I've dealt with my computer running out of memory and programs crashing and renders just taking a lot longer than I feel like they should. So it's definitely time for an upgrade. And of course, because I'm making games, I think it's important to have a strong PC that's good for playing games. However, this is more or less just a bonus of having really nice components for me. I haven't ever really been much of a PC gamer. I've been predominantly a console gamer, but I have been messing around with a couple games, namely Microsoft Flight Simulator and Cyberpunk 2077, and they both look and play fantastic on this thing. So maybe it will be a little bit more of a gaming station than my other setups have been. So my next major goal is to have high quality parts. I really don't want to have to deal with any headaches or any downtime from PC components breaking or just kind of having any issues, because if I can't use my computer for a certain amount of time, that's going to have direct impact on the amount of money that I can make. And I really do want these components to last a long time. I'm typically someone who kind of buys something and I stick with it for a long time. My previous couple setups, I've of course have made minor improvements here and there, but kind of the core system of it has stayed the same and has stuck with me for a number of years. And another thing that was an extremely big goal for me is having good airflow. I really want to make sure this computer can breathe really well. If I'm going to be putting a whole bunch of workloads at it and these components are really going to be working hard, I want to make sure there's constantly fresh, cool air running through that system, keeping all these components nice and cool and extending the lifespan of these components. As far as aesthetics go, I just wanted, a clean, simple black look, and I don't need to, spend any unnecessary money on, doing all kinds of RGB and stuff. Not that that stuff isn't necessarily cool, but it's definitely not for me, and especially on this build. Of course, cost is a consideration for me as well. If cost wasn't a consideration to me, then this would be, some ridiculous, crazy Threadripper build with multiple graphics cards. However, I am kind of working under a budget, and even though that this may be, a higher end PC that does cost a decent amount of money, cost was still certainly a consideration to make. And when I could find any of these parts on sale over the past couple months, I was taking advantages of those sales, and it did save me a couple $100s in the long run. Alright, so let's start with the heart of this beast, the CPU. I chose the AMD Ryzen 9 5950X. This is the top of the line high-end desktop CPU that you can get right now. Packs 16 cores with 32 threads and a 4.9 gigahertz boost clock. Again, I really wanted to prioritize a high core count in this because I do a lot of multitasking with my computers. I constantly have a whole bunch of programs open when I'm doing content creation, and I have a lot of background tasks running, so this was extremely important for me that I have a high core count so that my PC can continue to run smooth even with a whole bunch of things open. Also, like I mentioned, I am getting more into multi-threaded development, so having this high core count, I can do a whole lot of testing with 32 threads at my disposal. Then I can really analyze where we can see the best performance benefits from these multi-threaded workloads. I understand that most users aren't going to have this many cores, but it is going to be nice to test it at the high end so we can really kind of see what are the maximum benefits that we can get from that. And also, having this many cores, it allows me to do some virtualization, so I can set up smaller, essentially virtual computers on my computer that can have maybe lower core counts and lower amounts of RAM, so that I can actually do some testing to see what the user experience would be like for someone who has a PC that is much weaker than mine. And again, with this amount of system resources, I can have multiple of these virtual machines running, still while I have my main PC available for me to do work. So needless to say, I am extremely excited about this high core count CPU. So moving along to the motherboard, I got the Asus ROG Crosshair 8 Hero, the Wi-Fi model. I was originally going to get the non-Wi-Fi model, but as I started to look into the specs more, I found out that the non-Wi-Fi model actually does not have Bluetooth, and this was kind of a deal breaker for me. Bluetooth isn't necessarily something that I use every day, but it is certainly something that I would really like to have, and I don't just want to have a couple USB adapters for a Bluetooth and a Wi-Fi adapter, if I can just get those built right into the motherboard. But I'm really a big fan of Asus products. My previous two laptops were Asus. I've had good experiences with Asus BIOSes, and I know a lot of other people have as well. So that's why I went with one of the top of the line X570 motherboards from Asus. Again, this is a high-end component with high quality parts that are, theoretically should last me a long time, and it does have some really cool features. For example, one of these, and a lot of the lower end Asus motherboards have this as well, but it was a BIOS flashback feature where, because I actually got this motherboard before the processor that I have was even announced, so when I was building my PC the other day, I needed to do a BIOS update on it, but I didn't have a processor that I could just drop in. However, because this Asus board has this BIOS flashback feature, all I needed to do was plug in the motherboard to the 24-pin power connector, and I could just slide in a USB drive with the BIOS on it. I hold down the BIOS button for a couple seconds until it starts flashing, then it'll continue flashing for a couple minutes, and once it stops, the BIOS has been completely updated on the motherboard. So I just thought that it was so cool that I could, update the BIOS on the motherboard so it would be compatible with my new CPU without having to get a temporary CPU just to update the BIOS. So for RAM, I ended up going with 64 gigabytes of G.Skill Ripjaws 5 RAM. So these are just two, again, clean, simple black RAM sticks. I got two 32 gigabytes. They do have the DDR4 3600 megahertz with a CAS latency of 18. So these are fairly decent RAM sticks, and I did get them actually at a discount, so it was about $200 for this 64 gigabytes of RAM, which I do think is a really good price for this. The reason I went with 64 is because on my current setup, again, it is a laptop, but I do have 32 gigabytes of RAM in it, and I was constantly running out of RAM especially when I'm doing video editing. I also went with two 32GB sticks because my motherboard can support up to 128GB, so this does leave me options to buy 2 more of these RAM sticks to upgrade to 128 at a later date. Again, this is going to be plenty of memory for me to play with multiple virtual machines, so that is something that I'm definitely looking forward to doing. So for storage, this computer is actually going to have 4 hard drives. I only have 3 installed right now because the one on my laptop I am going to be using once I get everything moved over to this new PC. But so for my main hard drive, I got the Sabrent Rocket NVMe 4.0, the 1TB model. This was something that I got on sale, and I'm super happy that I did. Everything that I've been using so far on this new PC has been loading extremely quick. Like Microsoft Flight Simulator takes no time at all to load, and I know that a lot of people on some older hardware, this game really takes them a long time to load. So that's kind of going to be my main drive. You know, the main things that I'm working on at that moment are all going to be on that hard drive, as well as, you know, the operating system and maybe a couple main games that I'm going to be playing from time to time. Now the next hard drive I have is the Samsung 970 Pro 512GB. This is an M.2, it's a PCIe 3.0 drive, and this is currently the main hard drive in my laptop, and I'm actually going to be using this as a cache drive in this system. So basically all the Adobe cache files are going to be pointed to this drive, and it's going to be nice because if I ever need to, you know, clear out the cache files, I can literally just wipe that hard drive and, you know, the cache has been cleared. And then I do have 2 SATA drives. I do have the Samsung 860QVO 1TB. This is a 2.5-inch SATA SSD. This is basically going to be used for kind of like less frequently accessed media that I still want, you know, fairly quick access to. This was kind of just a hard drive that I had laying around, and I think it's going to fit nicely in this system. Lastly, I did buy a 4TB Western Digital WD Black. This is a 3.5-inch SATA hard drive, and this is basically just kind of for like that longer term storage of, you know, things that I still want, you know, fairly decently quick access to, that I'm not having, you know, up in the cloud or on some external drive somewhere. But this is just going to give me a whole bunch of extra space because these media files that I deal with do tend to add up over time. For the power supply, I ended up going with the Corsair HX Platinum 1200 watt. Yes, that's right, 1.2 kilowatts on this. So I know this is very much overkill for the current system that I have. Basically, I just wanted to have plenty of headroom to keep this running at an efficient level when my components are maxed out and this power supply is running at, like, you know, barely half capacity. You know, I think that's going to be a really good position for me to be in. Again, I'm not trying to really tax my power supply that much, and this is something that I don't want to put a lot of stress on. This was a component that I absolutely did not want to cheap out on because, you know, you never know what can happen. It could fry components or whatever or anything like that. This component does have a 10-year warranty, so this is something that I can use in my next build. You know, even if I do some crazy Threadripper build or whatever, this is certainly going to be able to last me through multiple builds. Alright, so for all these awesome components, they're going to need something to go inside. So for the case, I went with the Fractal Design Meshify S2. This is different than that brand new Meshify 2 that was just released. This was actually the first component that I bought for my system. I bought this way back in August, and basically when I was looking up cases, I wanted something that was, you know, just solid black. I didn't even want any glass panels on the side or anything like that, but I wanted it to have some good airflow, and the Meshify S2 was pretty much one of the only options that were out there when it came to good airflow designs for something with a black panel on the side. And it has that, you know, really cool angular mesh looking front, which I like a lot. And then as I was kind of looking at different options for the case, I saw that they had the dark tinted glass model. And I just thought that was like the coolest thing ever. You know, I wanted a completely black side panel anyways, and I think the dark tempered glass is a super subtle look. You know, you can kind of see the components and the couple things that do have lights. You can kind of see them barely poking out there a little bit. It is really dark tint. You know, if you look back at the PC right now, you can't really see my components inside it at all. But if you are looking at this one, just keep aware that it is really dark. But again, this is exactly what I'm looking for, and I just think it's, you know, the coolest looking case ever. It did come with 3 Fractal Design Dynamic X2 GP-14 black fans. These are 140mm black fans. So I actually purchased one more, so I have the 3 fans that it came with as intake. The one I purchased was the same fan, but it had a slightly different design on it, and I have that one as the exhaust fan out the back. Now for the cooler, I ended up going with the Fractal Design Celsius S36, which is a 366mm radiator, and it has 3 of the Fractal Design Dynamic X2 GP-12 fans. So these are 120mm black fans, and I have these going straight out the top. So we have 3 exhaust fans going out the top. I was originally looking at this one to essentially match the fans that I have that my case came with, even though when I got the cooler I found out that the way that the fans are oriented, you actually can't see the design on them because they're facing the radiator. Which is totally fine. Everything's all black. I think it looks great. One of the other really cool features of this radiator is it does have a built-in fan header. So all the fans plug into this little strip on the radiator, and then that has a wire that runs down to the pump, and then coming off the pump, you literally just have one plug that you plug right into the motherboard. So that hits the pump as well as the 3 fans. Also a cool little feature is there's a little knob on it where you can switch between PWM and auto for your fan management. And I've had it in the PWM setting pretty much since I got it, and it was pretty loud. I thought that that was just kind of like all my fans running, even the 140mm case fans and everything like that, and I thought that was just kind of what my computer would sound like. And as I was about to record this video, I was doing a little test of the audio to see what the audio levels were like, and you can kind of hear the fans a lot in the background. So I decided to turn the knob down to the auto setting, and this thing just went completely silent. like I'm sitting right next to it and I can't hear it at all right now. And the idle temperatures only went up about 2 degrees Celsius from changing it from the PWM to auto. But we will have to see what the temps are looking like when I actually put it under some heavy workloads. But anyways, I do think that cooler is really cool. Thought it was worth mentioning the monitors because I did actually get one new monitor, which is this monitor right here. This is the Asus TUF VG27AQ-L1A, which is a name that is totally reasonable. Anyways, this is a 1440p display, 144 Hertz, but it can be overclocked up to 170 Hertz. And I'm actually going to be using this as my main monitor from now on. The reason I want this main monitor is, I want the nice high refresh, the smooth display to be, right front and center for me. Currently on my current setup, I actually have my 4K Asus monitor, which is another 27-inch monitor, as my main display, and I'm actually going to be moving that over to my left as my secondary display. And because I have the higher resolution on that, I'm going to be able to, have a bunch of things open that I can reference all at one time. So it's going to be really nice for a secondary display. If I do ever want to watch any videos in 4K or play any games in 4K, it's not that difficult for me to just kind of move it over. And I am doing a triple monitor setup, so I do have an existing Dell. It's a 1920 by 1200 monitor, so it's a 16 by 10 aspect ratio. I have this one set up in portrait. It's really nice having the 16 by 10 as a portrait because it's just a little bit wider when you do have it set up in portrait mode. And for programming and referencing, documentation, reading long articles, or even just kind of, having some more, vertically oriented programs up on that one monitor has been, completely awesome for me. So I'm definitely going to be keeping around the portrait-oriented monitor. And then finally, something that you may have noticed that I skipped out on, something that I can use to power all 3 of these displays, the graphical processing unit. I did end up going with the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070 Founders Edition, which, to be honest, this was not the card that I necessarily thought that I was going to be getting for this. I tried to get the 3080 on launch day. That did not go too well for me. It basically sold out instantaneously. Pretty much the same story with the 3090. I wasn't necessarily willing to spend that much money on a 3090 either, so I'm glad that I didn't get stuck with one. But on launch day for the 3070, I actually did get lucky and was able to get one from Best Buy. And the way that I look at it right now is that this is kind of like a temporary card for me. This is something that is more powerful than what I currently have. This is something that gives me the latest and greatest graphical performance, and it's going to be more than enough for kind of the development and content creation workloads that I'm using it for right now. But I think as I do start to get more advanced in some of the certain workloads, I may want to look into a more professional level card. And so basically having this 3070 right now, this is gonna give me something that I can certainly use to its fullest ability for a long time to come. And it's not making me like rush out to get a brand new graphics card at launch day. When it does, I can kind of wait a little bit until the supply normals out and then I can pick one up. So anyways, that's what's inside my ultimate game development PC. I really do hope you enjoyed this video, kind of learned about what are the crazy things that I have in this brand new PC. Now is the time that I get to start actually using it and making some awesome things for you all. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on that. I have a ton of cool things planned for this, awesome PC. I wouldn't have spent this amount of money if I didn't have, some cool things in the works for it. So again, make sure you stick around for that. And if you do have any like specific ideas for, benchmarks or workloads or, cool things that you'd like to see me do with this PC, feel free to drop these down in the comment section below and I'll definitely, look into making some content from them. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed today's video and you found it helpful, kind of like learning about my thinking process about the parts that I purchased for my game development PC, and maybe this influences you to do the same. Again, do not think that because I've spent this amount of money and I have these amount of components in my PC, means that you need to do the same for your game development. You can really get like a mid-range laptop and be able to make some great games on it. The point is, where I'm at right now and the things that I'm trying to do, this does make a lot of sense for me to invest this kind of money into something like this. But anyways, that's all I have for today's video. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.